Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we will get started, I think. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this introductory webinar all about carbon literacy and social housing. My name is Ned Gatenby, and I am the Social Housing Coordinator here at the Carbon Literacy Project. So a little bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. The session is a recorded session, but your camera and audio won't be visible on the recording. And please use the Q&A function to ask any questions as we go through. Little agenda for today. We're scheduled to finish at or before 11 o'clock, which will make sure we stick to promptly. The first section of my presentation today is about what is carbon literacy. So I'll go through a little bit of the history and context of us as a project before a short Q&A midway through. And then the second half, I'll be going through a little bit more information about the Social Housing Toolkit and how social housing organisations can access carbon literacy training. And then we'll finish off with another Q&A and answer all of your questions as well. Later today, keep an eye on our socials as well. We'll be live streaming a pre-recorded interview with Broadacres Housing Association, who have recently been delivering training using the Social Housing Toolkit. So to begin, what is carbon literacy? Carbon literacy is defined as an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities. So this is understanding the climate impacts of the decisions that we make every day, coupled with the ability and motivation to reduce these emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. So these three facets of the definition come together to define what carbon literacy is. That's carbon literacy with a capital C and capital L, rather than a lowercase, which would kind of suggest a base understanding of climate change and surrounding issues. So where did we come from? Initially, the Carbon Literacy Working Group first came together and defined carbon literacy using with the definition I just described, and produced the Carbon Literacy Standard, which outlines all of the criteria that proper carbon literacy training must meet in order to result in carbon literate individuals following the training. This approach was then piloted and the contributing organisations coordinated the Carbon Literacy Project, which began in Greater Manchester. It operates and delivers work on behalf of the Carbon Literacy Trust, which is a registered charity. And since its inception has expanded across Greater Manchester, throughout the UK and into Europe and around the world as well. So a little bit about the Carbon Literacy Standard. The first key part of carbon literacy training is that it's a day's worth of learning. So this equates to around 8 hours of learning and is necessary so that learners can understand the full extent of climate change and exactly the role that they can play in it. The learning is also social learning. So this describes the process of bringing climate change to the learner's context so that they can understand and relate to the issues that relate to them. Peer-to-peer delivery is really important for carbon literacy training because our most trusted source of information is someone that we feel similar to. So if a peer is delivering carbon literacy training to their peers, then the information will be absorbed more effectively by everyone and result in that wider understanding of how we all play a part in climate change and the solution. And finally, all carbon literacy training must be accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project. This is measured against the parameters of the Carbon Literacy Standard and ensures consistency of training, no matter who delivers the training and where it is being delivered, to make sure everything is nice and understandable and relatable to all learners, no matter their circumstance. The Carbon Literacy Standard is separated down into these 4 areas. So the first is knowledge, then learning method, then values and action. And I'll just go through a little bit more about what these mean now. So firstly, knowledge. In knowledge, we all need to understand the basic understanding of climate change. So that's what is global heating and how we know about it and what it is. what climate change is and the effects that this is having on our daily lives here and around the world. And also what people need to do about it, what people are already doing about it, and what people like you could be doing about it in your current job role, community, or personal situation. The learning method is a really important part of carbon literacy training. So to ensure that everything is clear and consistent, all learning must cover at least around a day's worth of learning. So this is 7 to 8 hours of content. The learning must be local, so taking every opportunity throughout the content to connect wider issues related to climate change to the person's local area, job role, professional sector, so that all content can be relatable and understandable. I mentioned peer-to-peer before, this because our most trusted source of information are those we consider similar to ourselves. So delivery by one's peers is really important in carbon literacy. Group inquiry is also a really important aspect of carbon literacy training. So all training courses must make as much effort to be as interactive as possible, so that plenty of discussion, idea sharing, and learning from each other, with each other, and about each other takes place to really offer a full rounded picture and understanding of climate change and related issues. And finally, positivity is a really important theme in the learning method, so that a trainer can deliver with enthusiasm and passion to really empower their learners, and also so that learners emerge from the course feeling nice and positive about the solutions that can be found for the climate crisis. A bit about the values that make carbon literacy so unique. It's important that learners emerge from the training understanding that the action of individuals can and does make a difference, so that we can remove that feeling of hopelessness or disconnect from the actions that can solve climate change. It's important that we understand that we can work with others to create change. So that's this idea that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. So learning together, working together, and creating solutions together is really what's going to create that significant change and help us to combat the challenges of climate change now and well into the future. It's also important that we envision that the changes we need to make can lead to a better world and a better way of life, not just a world that's less bad than it might be if we don't do something about it now. And finally, themes of equity and fairness are really important. So connecting all of the people around the world and their different challenges, and helping to recognise that one size does not fit all when it comes to climate solutions. And also we need to use the emotional response to mobilize action. So climate change can often be quite an overwhelming or emotional subject to discuss. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world related to the climate, and it can be quite easy to feel lost and want to bury your head in the sand. But the value of turning this emotional response into action really helps for learners to feel empowered when it comes to taking carbon literacy into their job roles. And finally, action is the most important part of carbon literacy. All learners who take carbon literacy training must pledge at least 2 actions. So the first of these is an individual action, which is essentially something that that learner can do in their lives without the permission of others. And the second is a group action. So that is something that a learner can put into action alongside a group of others, be that in their job role or in their community, or at their place of study as well. Actions should be new. So this signifies a change to that learner's lifestyle, reminding us all that business as usual is not the solution to climate change. They should be significant. So something that makes a notable impact on carbon emissions or adaptation to climate change impacts. So for example, learners who pledge to recycle plastic may not recognise that that is the most significant action they can take, as compared with learners who might change their energy supplier to renewable tariffs or something like that. And actions must also be achievable. So the learner should demonstrate that they understand the steps that they need to take in order to achieve that action, and overall have a reduction in their carbon footprint. And it's nice for actions to be pledged in the context in which the learning has taken place. So if training has taken place in the workplace, learners' actions should be framed around their role at work, which will help to contribute to the overall shift in culture for that organisation, which can have wider benefits for the climate. So a little bit about carbon literacy training itself. Us at the Carbon Literacy Project do not deliver any training. We act more as an accreditation and certification body. So that means that training materials have been designed by an audience or an organisation with that particular audience in mind, submitted to the project for accreditation, and then the training materials are used for the purpose of certifying learners as well. Organisations or audiences devise their own courses, and all accredited courses should be used for the purpose of learner certification. Every official carbon literacy certificate is issued by the Carbon Literacy Project, and that's the result of each action being individually assessed against our criteria to ensure that all learners achieve carbon literacy and can demonstrate their understanding and ability to make that change to our wider culture and shift away from fossil fuel dependency and climate change as well. So carbon literacy awards operate at a few different levels. So we have the individual certification, which is what makes every citizen carbon literate. Some trainers also like to become certified as a recognised carbon literacy trainer. It gives them more confidence in their ability to deliver the training, and it also gives them a little bit more outward-facing credibility when approaching kind of senior leaders or external organisations to deliver training. I should mention as well, though, it's by no means a requirement to deliver carbon literacy training to become a certified trainer. You can do it if you are just a carbon literate individual yourself and a reasonably confident communicator. We also have another level of carbon literacy awards. This is the Carbon Literate Organisation Awards. And I'll come on to these a little bit more later, but they are a nice public-facing badge for organisations to demonstrate their commitment to action on climate change. And it's never a badge of greenwash. We're really careful to make sure that that's not the case, and that the awards result in meaningful and significant reductions to carbon emissions. And finally, for those organisations that really engage properly with carbon literacy training, offer it out to as many people as possible, and really take the torch. We have Carbon Literacy Training Organisation Awards as well. So I'll just stop here for a quick check in with the Q&A function, just see if anyone's got any questions about the Carbon Literacy Project. But I can't see any questions, so I'm going to take that as a good sign and move on to cover a little bit more about how social housing organisations can engage with carbon literacy. Carbon literacy is aimed at audiences who live, who work, and who study. So those who live, it's kind of community groups, it's training that's delivered for people in their communities with their lifestyles in mind, to help people feel empowered and connected to the wider conversation. And these are just a few of the organisations who have delivered training for community groups around the country and Europe. So those who study as well, There are educational institutions across the country, a few in Europe as well, and I think even now one in Australia, who have devised their own carbon literacy training materials and are rolling those out across their institutions as well. Another educational project we've got going on, the Scottish Government and Keep Scotland Beautiful have worked together and are currently in the process of rolling out carbon literacy training to secondary schools across the country with the aim of training over 5,000 pupils and teachers in 75% of Scottish secondary schools in a project called Carbon Ready Classrooms. So those who work, these are just a few of the organisations, the private organisations who have engaged with carbon literacy training. A lot of them have their own carbon literacy courses and have been really finding value in training their workforce in carbon literacy. We've also got carbon literacy training going on in local and regional authorities. So these are just a few of the councils across the country that are also delivering training to their staff in order to help reduce public sector emissions in their areas as well. And there's also some carbon literacy engagement with the National Health Service. I know for a fact a few of these, a few more trusts around the country than these on the slide are ready and engaged with carbon literacy training as well. So the work of all of these organisations, the work of the Carbon Literacy Project and the engagement by so many citizens has so far got us to over 23,000 citizens certified around the country and the world. And because all of those citizens pledge at least 2 actions, we've got over 46,000 actions pledged to help reduce carbon emissions and work together to create that shift in culture. So far, we have 1,974 different organisations engaged with carbon literacy, receiving training from at least one of 263 different accredited carbon literacy courses. A relatively new award as well is the Carbon Literate Organisation Award. And we've got 65 carbon literate organisations already. Certified training professionals exist in 64 places, delivering training across 14 nations. And a lot of these different organisations have come together and initiated consortia around the country as well. Jacobs, the construction firm, also conducted some research into their carbon literacy training and estimate that for every carbon literate member of staff or colleague trained, they can save around 5 to 15% in resource efficiency per person. So that obviously translates through to carbon reductions as well. So in the social housing sector, I mentioned that 10 consortia have been initiated, and one of these is the Clerks Consortium, which is a group of housing associations across Greater Manchester. Now they pooled their resources and came up with some shared carbon literacy training materials so that they could access the full programme across the region and work together to create solutions to the climate crisis that work for each of their individual organisations and across the region as a whole. As a result of this, they received some sources of external funding and embarked on a project to train 50 qualified carbon literacy trainers, which also included some local community organisations. And that gave really nice context to what registered providers in the region can do in terms of the climate crisis. That successful model of creating a shared community of carbon literacy and social housing has been mirrored as well in Wales with the Carbon Literacy Cartrefi Cymru consortium which links 27 housing associations around Wales and helps to create a really healthy community of housing providers coming up with solutions to the climate crisis, working together and sharing successes and lessons and training sessions so that solutions to carbon reduction can be found, and also big projects can be embarked on in terms of adapting to the climate crisis as well. So what is a carbon literacy toolkit? This is a relatively new initiative. So when the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy heard about us, they approached the project and suggested they could fund the production of a public sector toolkit initiative, which would open resource availability to resources for public sector organisations around the country, meaning that the government has funded training for public sector workers in various different departments. So that project led to the creation of sector toolkits for different government departments, local government and regional authorities, the NHS, blue light emergency services, and there's also some toolkits available for universities as well. Following the success of the toolkit model in opening access to training, the CLARPS Consortium has funded the creation of a toolkit for social housing using some of the residual funds from the original pot. So at the Carbon Literacy Project, we've partnered with Great Places Housing, who are a member of CLARPS, and refreshed their materials, because they were created quite some time ago, to produce a social housing toolkit. And that means that any organisation with access to the toolkit will always have access to the most up-to-date materials in terms of science and policy development in the conversation of climate change. And it makes the training accessible to housing providers around the country so that the sector can really mobilise change in terms of climate action and help to support customers and tenants around the country as well. So the Carbon Literacy Toolkit is currently suitable for staff and leadership teams, no matter their level of seniority or their department. It is a pre-accredited course, so once you have access to materials that deliver accredited training for all members of your organisation. To ensure that the training is relevant to your local area and your organisation specifically, there are points throughout that are customisable so that you can add your own flair to the materials and also include that organisation specific material as well. And the updates will be conducted by the Carbon Literacy Project so that developments in science and policy are kept nice and fresh as well. It's really important for public sector toolkits and the social housing toolkit that it's been created alongside sector professionals. It's really valuable and important to us at the Carbon Literacy Project that it's not seen as an exercise in telling people what to do, but rather as a questioning exercise that helps people come up with their own solutions that are definitely going to work for them. So in this spirit, we created the Carbon Literacy Toolkit through a series of consultation and focus group events, and members from all of these housing associations attended and helped us out. So the resulting materials were separated into four sequential modules for housing professionals to embark on. The first covers the climate change knowledge. So this is the science about the atmosphere, about the climate, and why we can trust the science and how we can understand it. Module 2 then introduces a really important theme for the social housing sector, which is the just transition. People who live in social housing are often have compounding risk factors that in the grand scheme of things put them less able to pursue their own adaptation and mitigation methods, and can often be left out of the conversation about climate change. So this theme of the just transition being included in the social housing toolkit was felt to be really important by our writing contributors as well. Module 2 also introduces the idea of climate co-benefits. So helping people to understand that climate change solutions need not be yet another thing to do on an already stretched to-do list, but rather solutions to existing challenges within the sector, if they are devised as low carbon solutions as well, then it can be a case of solving more than one problem with the same solution. We take this understanding of the different aspects of the just transition, the co-benefits of climate action, and the carbon footprints, and start to really apply this to buildings, to housing organisations, and to people and communities in their homes. We also felt it was important to include parallels from the COVID-19 pandemic, in that it demonstrated that it's really possible to take significant action quickly, and that the greatest change really happens when we all work together. And finally, in module 3, there is also a large section helping people to understand the best ways to communicate, particularly about climate change, when it can often be quite emotional, contentious, or switch people off. Learning and understanding how to effectively communicate about climate change will help people to know how to mobilize action in the first instance and throughout. Module 4 is where we consolidate all of the new understanding of the knowledge and the impacts of climate change, and really work with learners to help develop action pledges, understand what constitutes a significant pledge, and how to communicate that in such a way that you can demonstrate to the Carbon Literacy Project that you are carbon literate as a result of the training. So that's a really nice breakdown of the materials and how the training meets the criteria. So now I'll just introduce how you can use the toolkit. So the first really important step is that you yourself become carbon literate. Now, for housing organisations, Great Places Housing offers training to external organisations. So if you do want to become carbon literate yourself and don't yet have access to a course, that's a really good place to access some training. So if you are interested, the best thing to do first would be to contact us via housing@carbonliteracy.com. And once you have access to the materials, it's really important to go through absolutely everything and familiarise yourself with the content. People do often say it feels like you receive quite a lot, and it can be quite overwhelming to look at in the first instance. But as soon as you get through the materials, it really steps you through absolutely everything, and is really designed to sort of hold your hand through the whole process, and help to set your mind at ease, and ease any frustrations or concerns about what it might be like to deliver carbon literacy training yourself. The next step then is to customize the materials. So at those points that I mentioned earlier throughout the training, there are slides that you can add information about the properties that your organization manages, or local news stories about the impacts of climate change, things to really add that personal touch and to help learners connect with the issues from a personal and a professional perspective as well. And those points throughout the training are what we call blue slides. So they're nice and obvious, and help you to include the most relevant information that you can. And finally, the last step is to deliver to cohorts of learners. So we recommend average group sizes of around 12 to 15. This helps for the training to be effective, in that group size is small enough that everybody can contribute comfortably. The numbers kind of split evenly into different group sizes as well, so discussion activities throughout could be nice and varied and engaging too. So after all of this, your question might be, what are the costs involved in carbon literacy training? So that first step of getting yourself carbon literate really depends on who you access training from, but it's relatively inexpensive generally. The Social Housing Toolkit license itself is £2,000. That matches the original investment from the CLARPS member groups and grants you lifetime access. So once you have that license, every time we conduct updates to the materials, you'll get those sent through straight away. The only ongoing cost then is the certification. That's £10 per application, so every learner can become certified carbon literate. And that really helps us as a charity fund our work so that we can keep ongoing with our important work and engaging people in the climate change conversation. To access CLO awards for your organisation, these are costed on a sliding scale depending on the size of your organisation. For details of that, you can find the pricing matrix on our website as well. And if you wish to alleviate some of the group organisation involved, because it can be difficult to get people together for 8 hours or for plenty of sessions to fill the 8 hours. We also have an e-learning pathway, and the licenses for that are £40 per person. And that covers around 3 hours of the learning. So it really helps to reduce the logistics. And that can be self-led for learners to take in their own time as well. So that covers all of the main points about the Social Housing Toolkit. Thank you so much for your time listening to me today. If you have any questions now, I'll just pop into the Q&A and see what we've got going on. And I've had a question. Can you please explain how to become a carbon literacy certified trainer, please? So the process to becoming a carbon literacy trainer involves a few steps. So the first is to become carbon literate yourself. The second is to take a train the trainer program. There are a couple that are recommended by the Carbon Literacy Project, but if you have taken Train the Trainer training before, then all we need is like a summary of the content from that, and we can see if there's anything missing from that training that might help you become a certified carbon literacy trainer. After that, really key to start delivering some carbon literacy training. And then in order to receive your certification, a written account of your learning and development and understanding of all things carbon literacy to be submitted to the project. And then we can sort that certification out thereafter. So I hope that has answered your question on that one there, Georgina. We have no other questions. So I'll just point you in the direction of our social media before I sign off. So our Twitter is @carbon_literacy. Our Instagram is @carbonliteracy, and the same on Facebook. If you keep an eye out on those socials for the remainder of COP, you'll see all of our important updates, and then into the future, all of our all things going on in the world of carbon literacy and climate change can be found on these socials. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and I hope you enjoy carbon literacy as you begin to engage with the training. Thank you so much.